Under the blood moon's unyielding gaze, a single drop of crimson traced the curve of her throat, sealing fates yet unspoken. Alara stumbled through the whispering pines, the wind clawing at her tattered cloak like the fingers of forgotten ghosts. The forest of Eldridge was a labyrinth of ice and shadow, where the snow fell in relentless sheets, burying the world in a hush that mocked her ragged breaths. She was no longer of the Silver Fang pack. The Alpha's decree had stripped her of name and kin, branding her an Omega unfit for the hearth or the hunt. "Cursed blood!" they had spat, their eyes averted from the faint scar on her wrist, a mark from a night she dared not remember, when hunger had driven her to the edge of the forbidden. Banished at dawn, left to the mercy of the wilds, she clutched the small vial at her neck, its contents dark and viscous, a remnant of that same shadowed thirst. It was her secret, her shame, the blood of the night creatures, stolen in desperation to stave off the pack's starvation during the Great Famine. But secrets in a wolf's world festered like open wounds. The cold seeped into her bones, a relentless ache that mirrored the hollow in her chest. Her paws, human now, for the shift eluded her in this weakened state, sank into the drifts, each step a battle against the numbness creeping upward. The moon hung low, bloated and red, casting the snow in hues of rust and silver, as if the sky itself bled for her solitude. Uives echoed distantly, not the triumphant calls of her former brethren, but the mournful howls of lone wolves, harbingers of the untamed. Alara's vision blurred with tears that froze on her lashes. She had been the gentle one, the healer who bound wounds with herbs and whispers, yet they saw only the monster in her veins. The Alpha's mate, jealous of Alara's quiet affinity with the pack's lore, had whispered poison into his ear. "She drinks from the darkness. She will corrupt us all." And so, the exile, a slow death sentence under the guise of purity. She collapsed against a jagged boulder, the stone's chill biting through her furs. Her fingers, trembling, traced the vial's smooth glass, warm against her skin despite the frost. Inside swirled a drop of essence from the vampire clans of the Shadowed Vales, rumored immortal wanderers who traded life for eternal night. Alara had found it in the ruins of an ancient temple, drawn by a pull she couldn't name during a solitary pilgrimage. One taste had quenched the famine's fire in her belly, granting visions of paths unseen, but it had also awakened something feral, a hunger that simmered beneath her Omega's submission. The pack had discovered the vial during a raid on her den, and with it, their fear. "Witch," they growled, dragging her before the fire circle where flames danced like accusing spirits. The Alpha's judgment was swift, banishment to the whispering peaks where blizzards claimed the unworthy. As the wind howled its symphony of isolation, Alara curled into herself, the snow piling like a shroud. Memories flooded her, the warmth of the den, the Alpha's once kind gaze turning cold, the sting of rejection that cut deeper than any claw. What strength was there in survival, if it meant this endless night? She pressed her forehead to the frozen earth, whispering a prayer to the goddess of the moon. "If I am cursed, let the shadows claim me swiftly." But the moon offered no reply, only its crimson light pooling around her like spilled blood. Hours blurred into an eternity of shivers, until a distant crack shattered the silence, a branch snapping under unnatural weight, followed by the labored rasp of breath, not quite wolf, not quite man. Alara's senses sharpened, the vial at her throat pulsing with a faint, unnatural heat. She lifted her head, peering through the veil of flakes, and there, emerging from the tree line like a specter forged in torment, was a figure cloaked in midnight furs, his form staggering against the gale. He was no ordinary wanderer. Broad-shouldered, with the bearing of royalty even in ruin, he moved with the grace of an Alpha tempered by agony. Blood streaked his jaw. Not wolf's crimson, but something darker, laced with an otherworldly sheen. His eyes, when they met hers, burned with a feral gold, rimmed by shadows that spoke of battles lost and curses embraced. A king she knew instinctively. Thorn Blackthorn, the alpha king of the northern realms, whispered of in pack tales as the unbreakable guardian of the lunar throne. Yet here he was, felled by some unseen foe, his hand pressed to his side where fresh wounds wept. Their gazes locked across the frozen expanse, the wind pausing as if the world held its breath. Fear coiled in Alara's gut, mingling with a treacherous curiosity, the same pull that had led her to the vial years ago. He collapsed mere feet away, his body convulsing, and in that moment she saw the mark on his neck. Twin punctures, raw and glistening, the bite of a vampire. Legend spoke of such saviors in dire hours, their venom a double-edged blade, life granted, but at the cost of an insatiable bond. Ilara's heart thundered, the vial burning against her skin like a brand. To approach was to invite death, to flee was to condemn him. The moon watched, indifferent, as the first flakes of snow dusted his still form, and in the silence she felt the stirrings of a destiny she could not yet name. Alara's breath caught in her throat, a fragile vapor that hung in the frozen air like a plea unspoken. The Alpha King's form lay sprawled before her, his chest rising in shallow, ragged pulls, each one a defiance against the encroaching white death of the snow. Thorn Blackthorn, his name echoed in her mind like a half-remembered legend, the king who had forged alliances under blood moons and shattered armies with a single howl. Yet now he was no conqueror, but a broken vessel, the vampire's bite on his neck pulsing faintly, as if the venom sought to claim him from within. She should have run. The wilds of Eldridge demanded it. Survival whispered of flight from the unknown, from the predator whose scent alone could unravel an Omega's will. But her feet, numb and rooted, refused the command. The vial at her throat thrummed hotter now, its dark contents stirring as if alive, drawn to the metallic tang of his blood that seeped into the snow, staining it a deeper scarlet. Fear twisted in her belly, sharp as thorns. Yet beneath it bloomed a curiosity she could not quell, a magnetic pull, instinctive and forbidden, like the first whisper of the change that had always eluded her fully. Cautiously, she crept forward, the crunch of her steps muffled by the wind's ceaseless dirge. Up close, his face was a map of torment. High cheekbones etched with lines of exhaustion. Lips parted to reveal fangs elongated by the curse's grip. Not wolf's, but something ancient and shadowed. His eyes fluttered open, that golden gaze locking onto hers with an intensity that pierced the storm. In them, she saw not the rage of a cornered beast, but a profound weariness, the weight of a crown forged in guilt and endless war. "Who are you?" His voice was a gravelly rumble, laced with pain, carrying the authority of thrones even as it cracked. He tried to rise, but his body betrayed him, collapsing back with a guttural groan. The bite marks wept anew, the skin around them blackened, veins threading outward like roots of night. Alara hesitated, her hand hovering near the vial. The connection hit her then, unbidden and visceral, a thread of awareness snapping taut between them, as if the moon itself had woven their fates in silver. She felt his agony as her own, the fire of the venom racing through his blood, warring with the Alpha's unyielding strength. It was the same hunger she knew, the shadowed thirst that had branded her an outcast. Denial surged within her. This was madness. To aid a stranger whose very presence ignited instincts she had long suppressed. Yet curiosity won, pulling her closer, her fingers brushing the snow from his fur-lined cloak. "Ilara," she whispered, the name tasting foreign on her tongue after days of silence. "Of no pack now, and you. You're the king, they say, commands the northern storms." A bitter laugh escaped him, turning into a cough that sprayed flecks of dark blood onto the white. "Thorn. And commands? The storms command me now." His eyes narrowed, scenting the air around her, the faint, unnatural edge to her own aroma, mingled with pine and desperation. "You carry death's perfume, vampire's taint?" Her cheeks burned despite the cold, shame flooding her as she clutched the vial protectively. "Not by choice. It saved my kin once, in famine's grip, but it damned me." The words tumbled out, unbidden, drawn by the raw honesty in his gaze. She saw the parallel then, both marked by the night, both exiled in their own ways. The wind howled louder, as if protesting the intimacy of their shared secret, whipping snow into veils that blurred the world to just the two of them. He reached out, his hand large and calloused, grasping her wrist, not in violence, but in a plea masked as command. The contact sent a jolt through her, electric and unwelcome, stirring the Omega's core she had buried deep. "Help me," he rasped, his touch lingering on the scar beneath her sleeve, the one from her own forbidden sip. "The bite. It binds me. Saved my life in the ambush, but now it hungers. For blood. For more." Fear clawed higher, mingling with a treacherous warmth at his proximity. The Alpha's aura, even diminished, wrapping around her like smoke from a sacred fire. She pulled away, but not before glimpsing the guilt in his eyes, the melancholy of a king who had lost too much to betrayal. Whispers of his past flooded her thoughts, unbidden. The rival pack's treachery at the lunar summit, where assassins had struck under Truce's veil, leaving him for dead until the vampire's desperate intervention. Now, the curse twisted that salvation into chains of desire, a bond that demanded surrender. The distant Weavos grew nearer, pursuers, perhaps his enemies or her former pack, drawn by the scent of blood on the gale. Thorn's head snapped up, a low growl rumbling from his chest, primal and protective despite his frailty. "They're coming! Hide us, Omega, or we both perish here!" Alara's mind raced, the vial pulsing like a second heart. To deny him was to embrace her isolation anew. To aid him was to court a danger that mirrored her own shadowed soul. The snow swirled thicker, burying their tracks. But not their budding connection, one born of fear's sharp edge and curiosity's quiet flame. She nodded once, helping him to his feet, his weight heavy against her slight frame as they stumbled toward the shadowed maw of a nearby cave, its entrance yawning like the goddess's own secret. Inside, the wind's fury dulled to a mournful sigh, the cave's walls glistening with ice that caught the moon's crimson light in fractured prisms. They collapsed together onto a ledge of frozen stone, his body radiating unnatural heat against the chill. Empathy flickered in her chest, uninvited, as she tore a strip from her cloak to bind his wounds. His breath ghosted her neck, stirring the vial's warmth, and in that shared refuge, the first threads of a bond wove tighter, instinct denied, yet undeniable. As the Uivos faded into the night, Alara met his gaze again, the cave's silence amplifying the ethical precipice before them. What was mercy, if not risking the curse's embrace? The fire in his eyes promised redemption's cost, and she wondered if her own hidden thirst might be the key or the undoing. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The cave's icy embrace cradled them like a reluctant guardian, its walls etched with veins of frost that mirrored the dark threads creeping from Thorn's bite. Ilara's hands trembled as she pressed the makeshift bandage against his neck, the fabric soaking through with a warmth that defied the chill. His blood, rich, metallic, laced with the vampire's venom, seeped onto her fingers, stirring the vial at her throat into a frantic pulse. It was as if the shadows within recognized their kin, whispering of hungers long denied. She pulled back, wiping her palms on her cloak, the metallic scent clinging to her skin like an accusation. Thorn's golden eyes tracked her every movement, heavy-lidded yet piercing, as if he could see the storm raging beneath her composed facade. The alpha in him should have demanded submission from the omega at his side, but the curse had stripped him of that easy dominance. Instead, there was only this raw vulnerability. A king's armor cracked open to reveal the man beneath, melancholy etching his features like scars from battles unseen. "You didn't have to stay," he murmured, his voice a low rumble that echoed off the stone, stirring the silence into something alive. "An outcast like you. The wilds would have swallowed you whole by now, if not for this folly." Alara met his gaze, the cave's dim light casting his face in stark relief. The sharp line of his jaw shadowed by stubble, the faint tremor in his breath betraying the fever building within. Fear coiled tighter in her chest, not just of him, but of the empathy blooming unbidden, a treacherous warmth that softened the edges of her isolation. She had fled her pack's judgment, the alpha's cold decree echoing in her ears, unfit, tainted, a whisper of darkness in their midst. Yet here, in this frozen tomb, she felt seen, not as a monster, but as a mirror to his own shadowed soul. "Folly?" she echoed, her voice soft, threaded with the wind's distant moan. "Or fate's cruel jest? The moon doesn't spare the broken. It binds them." He shifted, wincing as the movement tugged at his wounds, his hand brushing hers in the dimness. The contact was electric, a spark that ignited the air between them, drawing forth instincts she had buried deep. The Omega's pull toward an alpha's strength, twisted now by the shared curse of night. Denial surged within her. This was no mate bond, no destined union whispered in pack lore. It was desperation, born of the storm and the blood, rationalized as mere survival. But as his fingers lingered, calloused and warm against her chilled skin, she felt the first fracture in her resolve. The vial hummed, its contents swirling like a storm-tossed sea, and visions flickered at the edge of her mind. Paths through the snow, hidden trails lit by crimson moonlight, a gift she had always dismissed as madness from her forbidden sip. Outside, the Uivos sharpened, no longer distant echoes, but a chorus closing in. Pursuers, their snarls cutting through the gale like knives. Thorn tensed, his body coiling despite the pain, a low growl vibrating from his chest. "My brother's pack," he said, the words laced with bitter resignation. "Victor." He orchestrated the ambush at the summit, craving the throne. The vampire's bite was his assassin's final mercy, or trap. Now they hunt the weakness it sowed. His eyes darkened, guilt flashing like lightning in a tempest. He was the king who had failed his realm. Alliances shattered by betrayal, his rule stained by the blood of kin he couldn't save. The weight of it pressed on him, heavier than any crown, and in that moment, Alara glimpsed the ethical chasm he straddled, duty demanding war, yet his soul yearning for peace. The cave entrance trembled as shadows loomed, the wind carrying the acrid scent of fur and fury. 3 wolves burst through the veil of snow, their forms massive and snarling, eyes glowing with feral intent. Victor's betas, marked by the rival pack's iron collars glinting under the moon's bleed. They scented the air, nostrils flaring at the mingled traces of alpha blood and omega desperation. Ilara's heart hammered, the cold forgotten in the surge of adrenaline. She scrambled back, pressing against the wall, but Thorn rose unsteadily, positioning himself between her and the threat. "Stay behind me," he commanded, voice steel despite the tremor, his claws extending as the curse lent him unnatural speed. The first wolf lunged, jaws snapping, but Thorn met it with a savage swipe, his weakened frame fueled by the venom's fire. Blood sprayed, hot and vivid against the ice, the metallic tang filling the air like a ritual incense. Ilara's instincts screamed to flee, to let the king face his doom alone, preserving her fragile solitude. But as the second assailant circled, its eyes locking on her with predatory glee. She felt the bond tighten, a visceral tug, empathy twisting into resolve. She couldn't abandon him, not when his pain echoed her own rejection. The pack's betrayal a shared wound. Grabbing a jagged shard of ice from the floor, she struck out, the improvised weapon glancing off the wolf's flank with a crack that reverberated like thunder. Thorn dispatched the second with a roar that shook the cavern, his body a blur of shadow and fury, but the third pinned him, fangs grazing his shoulder. In that heartbeat of peril, Alara acted without thought, the vial's heat surging through her veins. She smashed it against the wolf's muzzle, the dark contents spilling in a viscous arc, vampire essence that burned like acid on contact. The beast yelped, recoiling in agony, its form convulsing as the curse's taint spread. Thorn finished it with a merciful snap, collapsing beside her as the echoes of the fight faded into panting breaths. Silence descended, broken only by the drip of melting ice and their synchronized heartbeats. He turned to her, blood-streaked and breathless, his hand finding hers in the gloom. "You fought. For me." Wonder laced his words, the Alpha's melancholy yielding to something softer. A bond forged in the crucible of shared defense. Ilara's chest ached with the weight of it, the empathy that had bloomed into connection. Undeniable now, though her mind rebelled. The spilled vial's remnants gleamed on the floor, a symbol of their intertwined curses, binding them in desire's shadowed chains. What was strength, if not choosing alliance over isolation? The moon's light filtered in, painting their forms in silver and red as the first true warmth of trust kindled between them. Yet as Thorn's gaze lingered, heavy with unspoken need, Alara felt the curse's whisper, the hunger that demanded more than survival, a desire that could redeem or destroy. In the refuge's fragile peace, the ethical precipice loomed. Would she embrace the bond or sever it before it consumed them both? The cave's shadows deepened as the storm outside raged on, a symphony of fury that sealed them in their fragile sanctuary. Alara's pulse thrummed in her ears, syncing with the drip of water from the ceiling, each drop a reminder of the blood spilled, the vial's essence now smeared across the stone floor like a profane sacrament. The remnants clung to her skin, sticky and warm, awakening a fire in her veins that she had long mistaken for shame. Thorn lay beside her, his chest heaving, the fresh wounds on his shoulder mingling with the vampire's bite in a tapestry of crimson. His golden eyes, dimmed by exhaustion, held hers with a quiet intensity, as if the fight had stripped away the last veils between them. She shifted, the cold stone biting into her back, but the discomfort paled against the storm within. The spilled blood from the vial pulsed in her mind's eye, not as a curse, but as a key turning in some ancient lock. Visions had always teased her since that forbidden sip, fleeting glimpses of hidden trails through the snow, whispers of unseen dangers, but now they surged, unbidden and vivid, like moonlight piercing a clouded sky. Her breath hitched as the cave walls seemed to dissolve, revealing paths etched in silver, a winding route through the whispering peaks, leading to a forgotten temple where lunar runes glowed against ice. There, a ritual waited, one that could sever the venom's chains, binding not just Thorn, but the realms torn by his brother's betrayal. "What is it?" Thorn's voice pulled her back. Rough yet gentle, his hand still clasped in hers. The contact grounded her, his alpha warmth seeping through the chill, stirring the Omega's instincts she fought to suppress. He was no longer the distant king of legends, but a man marked by guilt, his melancholy a mirror to her own exile. The betrayal at the lunar summit haunted him. She could feel it in the tremor of his touch, the weight of a throne stained by kin's ambition, alliances fractured like the ice around them. Victor, his brother, had not just sought power. He had twisted the vampire's intervention into a weapon, ensuring the bite's curse would erode Thorn's rule from within, turning desire into a devouring hunger. Alara swallowed, the metallic taste lingering on her tongue, a echo of the essence she had unleashed. "I see things," she confessed, her voice a whisper lost in the wind's muffled howl. Denial clawed at her. This was the taint her pack had feared, the reason for her banishment. But the words spilled forth, drawn by the trust kindled in battle. Paths, not just in the snow, but in the blood, the shadows, the vial. It wasn't just survival, it awakened something. A gift, perhaps, from the night creatures, or the goddess herself. His eyes widened, the golden flecks igniting with recognition. He sat up slowly, ignoring the pain that etched lines across his brow, his free hand tracing the blackened veins at his neck. The curse had bound them already. The vampire's venom forging an invisible tether. His hunger echoed in her veins, a desire that whispered of surrender, of bodies entwined under the moon's indifferent gaze. But now, as her words hung in the air, he leaned closer, inhaling her scent. Pine, frost, and that faint, intoxicating edge of darkness. Pathfinder, he breathed, the ancient title from lunar lore falling from his lips like a revelation. The Omegas of old, marked by the Deuce's shadow, who guided kings through tempests of fate. They were said to heal not with herbs, but with sight, unveiling destinies woven in blood and moonlight. The word struck her like a claw to the heart. Her pack had called it witchcraft, the visions that came in famine's grip, leading her to the vial in the temple ruins. She had hidden it, rationalizing the glimpses as fever dreams, resisting the pull that set her apart. Yet here, with Thorn's gaze upon her, the gift manifested fully, the cave filling with ethereal light in her mind's eye. She saw him clearly then, not as a broken alpha, but as the fulcrum of the realm's survival. Victor's treachery extended beyond the throne, a pact with the vampire clans, trading northern blood for eternal night, unleashing a war that would drown the packs in shadow. Only a Pathfinder could reveal the hidden alliance, the ritual to break the curse and expose the betrayal. Tears welled in her eyes, freezing on her lashes as the weight settled. This was no mere refuge. It was the crux of destiny, her exile the forge that had prepared her. Thorn's hand tightened on hers, his touch igniting sparks along her skin. The curse's desire coiling low in her belly, resisted yet undeniable. "You're the key," he murmured, voice thick with awe and guilt. "The moon chose you for this. For me, I've carried this wound too long, the brother's blade, the crown's burden. But you see the way through the dark." Empathy flooded her, mingling with fear. His melancholy resonated with her rejection. Two souls adrift in the storm, bound by blood's insistent call. The wind outside shifted, carrying the faint weavos of distant packs, a reminder of the gathering threats. Ilara pulled away slightly, the intimacy too raw, the desire of fire she wasn't ready to feed. "And if I lead you to ruin?" she challenged, her voice steady despite the turmoil. "The gift demands choice, power or compassion. War against Victor, or mercy that might shatter us both?" Thorn's expression softened, the alpha's resolve cracking to reveal the man beneath, ethical and torn. "Then we choose together. Redemption isn't claimed alone." The cave's silence amplified his words. The spilled vial's remnants gleaming like stars in the frost, a symbol of their shared curse now turned to purpose. As the visions faded, leaving her breathless, Ilara felt the Renascimento stir, a rebirth not of flesh, but of will. The moon's light slanted through the entrance, painting their faces in silver and red, and in that moment, the bond deepened. Her hidden light the beacon he had sought in endless night. Yet the ethical precipice yawned before them. To embrace her gift was to step into the fray, weaving love with the threads of war and forgiveness. What was destiny, if not the courage to claim it amid the blood and fire? Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The wind clawed at the cave's mouth like a vengeful spirit. hurling snow in furious gusts that seeped through cracks in the ice, whispering of the confrontation drawing near. Ilara's visions lingered in her veins, a silver thread pulling her toward the inevitable. But the weight of revelation pressed heavier now, stirring the embers of doubt into flame. Thorn's hand still held hers, his touch a anchor in the gathering storm. Yet as the distant howls sharpened into a predatory chorus, she felt the pull of the past, her pack's rejection, his brother's betrayal, converging like shadows under the blood moon. They emerged from the refuge at dawn's reluctant creep. The sky a bruised canvas streaked with crimson, the snow churned to bloody slush by unseen paws. Thorn moved with a predator's grace renewed by her gift's guidance. The vampire's bite on his neck, a throbbing reminder of the curse that bound them, its dark veins pulsing in rhythm with her own quickened heart. The spilled vial's essence had seeped into the earth behind them, but its mark lingered on her skin, a faint, iridescent stain that caught the light like forbidden stars. It was their symbol now, the blood that had damned and saved, weaving desire's chains tighter with every shared breath. The trail her visions revealed wound through the whispering peaks, a treacherous ascent where jagged rocks clawed at the sky and the wind carried echoes of ancient oaths. Ilara led, her steps sure despite the ache in her limbs, the Pathfinder's sight unveiling hidden crevices that shielded them from the gale. Thorn followed close, his presence a wall of heat against the cold, his golden eyes scanning the horizon with the melancholy vigilance of a king haunted by ghosts. "Victor's forces will converge at the Frostvale Pass," he said, his voice low, threaded with the gravel of unspoken guilt. "The summit where he struck, its sacred ground, under the moon's eternal watch. He'll demand my surrender there, or my blood." She glanced back, meeting his gaze, the desire stirred by the curse flickering like firelight in the depths of his eyes. It was no gentle pull, this bond. It gnawed at her resolve, rationalizing the Omega's instinct to yield as mere survival, even as her heart rebelled. Love was no reward here, but a trial forged in fire and frost, redemption's blade cutting through the scars of rejection. Her own past clawed upward, the Silverfang Pack's fire circle, the Alpha's decree branding her tainted, the Omega who had dared the night now exiled to wander alone. Yet Thorn's guilt mirrored it, the brother he had raised, mentored, only to see ambition twist into treachery, shattering the northern alliances he had bled to build. As they crested a ridge, the pass unfolded below, a vast amphitheater of ice and stone, ringed by towering pines, bent like supplicants under the moon's fading glow. Torches flickered in the distance, their flames dancing red against the white, illuminating a gathering host, Victor's betas, their fur matted with frost, eyes gleaming with feral hunger. At their center stood Victor himself, broad and shadowed, his pelt marked by the iron sigil of the rival Ironclaw Pack, a crown of thorns forged in betrayal. The air thickened with the scent of blood and smoke, the wind carrying weavos that mourned the fractured bloodline. Thorn halted, his body tensing, claws extending as the curse lent him an edge of shadowed speed. "Stay back," he growled, but Ilara stepped forward, her hand brushing his arm, a touch that sent sparks through the bond, desire coiling low and insistent, resisted yet aching. The packs below scented them, heads snapping up, a ripple of snarls rising like a tide. Victor shifted to his human form, towering and scarred, his laugh a bark that echoed off the peaks. "Brother," he called, voice oily with false kinship, "you crawl from your hole like a whelp, reeking of night witchery. The vampire's gift suits you, weak, hungering, unfit for the throne." Thorn's face hardened, the melancholy cracking into resolve, but Ilara felt his turmoil through their tether, the ethical chasm of kin against crown, war's demand for vengeance clashing with the compassion that had defined his rule. He had spared Victor once after a border skirmish, choosing mercy over exile, only to breed this deeper wound. Now, as the betas circled the pass's edge, torches raised to light the ritual ground, the choice loomed: unleash the Alpha's fury, or seek a path through forgiveness's thorns. Alara's visions surged again, the bloodstain on her wrist glowing faintly, unveiling the truth. Victor's pact with the vampire clans, sealed in a hidden cavern beneath the pass, trading pack lives for immortal power. She stepped beside Thorn, her voice steady despite the fear gnawing her core. "It's not just ambition," she said aloud, the words carrying on the wind, drawing all eyes. "You've sold the North to shadows. Victor, the bites aren't mercy, they're chains for us all." The traitor snarled, his form blurring as he lunged forward, betas flanking him in a wave of fur and fang. Thorn met the charge, his roar shaking the snow from the pines, claws raking through the first assailant in a spray of crimson that steamed on the frost. Blood arced like accusations, the metallic tang mingling with pine and smoke, the moon's light turning the battlefield to a canvas of silver and red. Alara dodged a beta's swipe, her pathfinder sight guiding her strikes. A fallen torch seized, its flames whipping like a serpent to singe fur and drive back the tide. But Victor closed on Thorn, brother against brother, their forms colliding in a frenzy of blows that cracked stone and drew blood in rivulets down furred hides. The king's guilt fueled his strikes, each one a lament for the bond shattered, yet hesitation flickered. A moment's pause that allowed Victor's fangs to graze his flank, reopening the vampire's bite. Pain lanced through their shared curse, Alara gasping as if struck herself, the desire twisting into agony, demanding she choose, flee to freedom's isolation, or bind deeper in love's redemptive fire. She hurled the torch at Victor, flames erupting in a blaze that forced him back, the fire's roar drowning the Weavos. Thorn pinned him then, jaws at his throat, the pass falling silent save for ragged breaths and the crackle of burning pine. "End it," Victor spat, eyes defiant yet pleading, the traitor's mask cracking to reveal the boy Thorn had once protected. The Alpha's paw trembled, the moral precipice yawning. Vengeance would secure the throne, but war's cycle would consume the realms. Forgiveness might heal, but at the cost of trust, of the bond with Alara that demanded vulnerability. Alara approached, the snow crunching under her feet, her hand on Thorn's shoulder. A touch that steadied him, the curse's hunger yielding to compassion's call. "Mercy crowns the worthy," she whispered, echoing the ancient lunar creed, her own rejection a scar that taught her the cost of unyielding judgment. Victor snarled, but Thorn released him, stepping back as the betas wavered, the fire's light casting long shadows of doubt. The traitor rose, bloodied and unbowed, his gaze flicking between them, the king and the Omega bound by night's blood. Their union, a revelation that unraveled his schemes. "This isn't over," he growled, signaling retreat, the packs melting into the storm like ghosts. Yet as silence reclaimed the pass, Thorn turned to Alara, his eyes heavy with the weight of choice, desire and guilt intertwining like vines. Freedom whispered of severance, love of union. But in the blood-smeared snow, under the moon's watchful eye, the true judgment lingered. Could redemption bloom from betrayal's ashes, or would war's shadow claim them yet? The wind sighed, carrying the scent of fire and blood away, but the ethical fire burned on, demanding one final surrender. The blood moon hung low over the Frostvale Pass, its crimson glow bleeding into the snow like veins of fate, illuminating the churned earth, where fire's embers smoldered and the metallic tang of spilled life lingered on the wind. Alara stood amidst the wreckage, her breath a fragile mist that curled toward the stars, the iridescent stain on her wrist, remnant of the vial's shattered essence, pulsing with a warmth that defied the encroaching frost. It was their symbol now, this mark of shadowed blood, binding her exile to Thorn's curse in threads of desire and destiny. Victor's retreat had left the pass echoing with uneasy silence, the beta's howls fading into the peaks like defeated spirits, But the true battle raged within, the ethical fire that demanded not just survival, but surrender. Thorn knelt in the slush, his form heaving. The vampire's bite on his neck, a raw wound that wept dark rivulets down his chest. His golden eyes lifted to hers, shadowed by the melancholy that had defined him. The king who had chosen mercy over vengeance, sparing his brother only to invite deeper betrayal. Guilt etched his features, deeper than any claw mark. The weight of fractured alliances and a throne teetering on war's edge, pressing like an unseen crown. Yet in that gaze burned a quiet fire, the curse's hunger twisting into something profound, a desire not for conquest, but for the union that could redeem them both. "Ilara," he rasped, his voice a rumble laced with the wind's sigh. "You stayed, through the blood, the fire. You chose me." She felt it then, the bond coiling tighter, an instinctive pull that warred with her rational mind. The Omega's yearning for an Alpha's strength, amplified by the night's taint, whispering of bodies entwined, of surrender under the moon's indifferent watch. Rejection's scar throbbed in her chest, memories of the Silverfang Pack's fire circle flooding back, the Alpha's cold decree, the whispers of witchcraft that had branded her unfit, driving her into the wilds alone. Love was no balm here, no easy reward. It was proof, a trial forged in the crucible of shared wounds, demanding she embrace the very darkness that had damned her. The wind howled softly, carrying the distant weavos of lingering shadows, as if the goddess herself urged the choice. Sacrifice the isolation of freedom, cure the curse through union, or let war's cycle claim them in eternal night. Ilara knelt before him, her fingers tracing the blackened veins at his throat, the contact igniting sparks that raced through her blood. The stain on her wrist glowed faintly, her Pathfinder vision surging once more, not paths of escape, but a revelation deeper than stone. The hidden cavern beneath the pass, where Victor's pact with the vampire clans pulsed like a heart of shadow. There, in the temple's lunar heart, a ritual awaited. Blood mingled under the moon, the Omega's gift weaving with the Alpha's will to sever the venom's chains. But it required more than sight. It demanded vulnerability, the merging of souls in a rite as intimate as it was sacred, binding them irrevocably in desire's embrace. "I see it," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her core, the cold seeping into her bones like doubt's chill. "The cure. It's in us. But it asks everything. My gift, your crown, the walls we've built against the hunger." Tears traced frozen paths down her cheeks, the empathy that had bloomed in the cave now a flood, washing away denial. Thorn's hand cupped her face, calloused and warm, his touch stirring the curse's fire low in her belly, a visceral ache that rationalized resistance as folly. He was broken, this king marked by guilt, his ethical soul torn between duty's war and compassion's peace. She was reborn from rejection, her hidden light the beacon he needed. What was strength, if not choosing union over the abyss? He rose, pulling her with him, their bodies aligning in the snow's hush, the wind pausing as if the world held its breath. The pass's torches flickered out one by one, shadows lengthening like supplicants to their resolve. "Then we face it together," Thorn murmured, his lips brushing her forehead, the Alpha's aura wrapping around her like smoke from a sacred pyre. Desire ignited, undeniable now, as they descended into the cavern's maw, a yawning fissure veiled by ice, its depths humming with ancient power. The air grew thick, laced with the scent of damp stone and forgotten blood, the walls etched with lunar runes that glowed silver in her visions, guiding them to the temple's core. There, under a dome of fractured crystal that channeled the moon's light into crimson pools, they knelt before the altar, a slab of obsidian veined with frost, where echoes of past pathfinders lingered like ghosts. Alara's heart thundered, the stain on her wrist burning as she drew a ritual blade from the shadows, its edge glinting like starfire. Thorn bared his neck. The bite's puncture a testament to salvation's cost, and she pressed the blade to her own palm, crimson welling forth to mingle with his in a chalice of bone. The blood swirled, dark and luminous, the curse's hunger surging, a tidal wave of need that blurred the line between pain and ecstasy. As they drank, the bond sealed. Visions exploded in shared splendor, unveiling Victor's downfall, not in war, but in truth's light. The pact exposed, alliances reforged through mercy's crown. The venom receded, veins fading to pale scars, but the desire remained, transformed, not a chain, but a willing tether, love's proof in the fire of rebirth. Thorn's arms encircled her, their breaths mingling in the temple's hush, bodies yielding to the right's demand in a union of flesh and spirit, tender amid the tragedy. Waves of release crashed through her, the Omega's submission a choice, not surrender, his alpha strength a shield, not a cage. The moon's light bathed them, silver and red entwining like fates woven anew. In that renascimento, rejection's ashes birthed royalty, Ilara no longer the outcast, but the queen who healed the king's wound. Thorn, guilt's burden lifted, ruling with compassion's blade. The cavern trembled softly, runes flaring as the ritual completed, the wind outside shifting to a gentle sigh, carrying their howls of triumph into the night. Yet the ethical echo lingered. Redemption was no end, but a flame to guard, love's eternal vigil against despair's shadow. They emerged into the dawn's pale light, hands clasped, the bloodstain on her wrist now a badge of union, pulsing with quiet power. The peak stood sentinel, snow falling in soft veils, as if the goddess approved. In the silence, Ilara felt whole, scarred, but sovereign, the curse broken, desire's bond a redemptive crown. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.